Never stop asking.
Just there, maybe a bit further away from me. Fantastic.
Just good.
Well, welcome, Bill Roedy. Thank you for coming, all of you. And just a reminder, we're the BBC World News. Obviously, I'm Sharanjit Leyl from the BBC, and this is part of the In Conversation series that we've been having over the last few days here at CASBAA. Now, we'll start with you, Bill. Obviously, you define, or rather, you were responsible for the MTV generation in the 1980s. You couldn't quite get away from that slogan, "I want my MTV." Is that still true, 2 decades later? Is it still relevant?
Yeah, no, I think so. But by the way, that was not an MTV tape, just for the record.
Yes.
I think it is. I mean, we've never been in front of a larger audience than we are now. Our potential audience is 2 billion people with a B. We've got, 160 total channels in MTV networks, of which about 60 are MTV. And we just launched in Middle East, Arabia, to 200 million Arabs. I launched Pakistan, MTV Pakistan, last year in Karachi, and as I walked off, everyone started singing, "I want my MTV." So Pakistanis wanted their MTV. And actually some parts of the world, it's earlier on the life cycle than it is in the U.S. So, yeah, I know you want your MTV because you told me who the VJs were 20 years ago. So don't forget. Just don't blame us for short attention span.
That's right. But unfortunately, I have to say I haven't been watching it quite as much. I don't know if that's age or perhaps because there's a lot of other channels now providing the same kind of content. So there's a proliferation of a lot of rivals that have come up locally in all those different markets. I mean, how do you compete with them?
Well, you're right. Actually, we compete as well by launching more channels. So, in some markets, I just came from London, we have, 9 music channels. And MTV genre specific, of course, MTV, and then we have VH1, and then we have VH1 Classics. You're more MTV than VH1 Classics. We also have quite a few local brands that we have acquired over the years, Viva and TMF. So, we compete, obviously, because we are the biggest, but much more importantly than that, it's, just about reinventing yourself, having young people, in charge of your programming, knowing the music, being passionate about the music, never resting on your laurels, and, just getting the pendulum right between local and global, which is an ongoing challenge, and obviously multi-platform. So there's many ways we compete, and most importantly is we wake up every day not resting on our laurels, looking over our shoulders at the competition, and, being as passionate as ever.
Now, you talk of getting the balance right between local and global, and obviously you were one of the key architects behind the whole localization model. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, early on, 20 years ago, when I started the whole thing, I made my first trip, I think it was to Finland, and I saw the Beverly Hillbillies in prime time, and I said, that's probably not sustainable in Finland. And I just kind of, intuitively thought that, to be a sustainable business and to connect with consumers, you really got to go local. And there's a lot of global brands, actually, that have not made it work around the world because they didn't go local enough. And so that's our whole thing. That's our core. It's a driving force behind everything we've done over the 20 years. I like to say we were a pioneer. We were local before local was cool. And it wasn't easy at first because it was swimming upstream. It cost more money. It was more investment to localize operations around the world. But, I really believe so passionately that was the only way to go. And by the way, it's not just product, very importantly. It's how the brand's interpreted, the attitude, the relationships have got to be driven locally. You can't do this from Singapore or, London or New York. And the employees have got to be local. We have, I think, 3,000 employees around the world. Less than 1% are American, for example. And the management has to be given full accountability and responsibility, and it also has to be, in my mind, local. So, it's much more than just the product. Now, with that being said, and that really is the driving force, and I think it's been our key success factor over the years, we also have to balance that with a global leverage and efficiency and scale. Scale, very important. So when we produce shows that have high production value, you want to make those shows work worldwide. So that's about packaging them correctly. It's also might be about formats. Some of our series now we format around the world. And a lot of this depends on what brand we're talking about, whether it's Nickelodeon, comedy, MTV. But on the MTV side, we're actually skewing it. We're still obviously very driven by the local part, but we're we're taking advantage of our scale because we're so big with common elements of look and creative and on air. So we're actually moving that part a little bit more to the global side. But in the end, global versus local, it's you got to go with the flow. You got to constantly research your audience, and it's constant fine tuning. So it depends a lot on your research and management, and just good old judgment in the end.
Right. Now you talk about researching the audience, and you've just done a bit of a survey recently that actually found that despite your emphasis on going local, there's actually a lot of commonalities amongst youth in different countries. I believe this was a survey of 18 different countries. So how do you fine-tune that? How do you consistently keep fresh with what kids want? And essentially, how do those key elements, those key commonalities sort of transfer through to different markets?
Constantly research our audience is really number one. Everything is audience-driven. It's very important not to have an elite group in a room somewhere programming all these channels. So that's number one. That's how we really connect with our audience. On the music side, we obviously hire a lot of young people who are, quite connected to music and driven. And the creative process is very important. A culture of creativity is key, really to our success. And experiment, and we make mistakes often. We hopefully have a culture which I try to encourage of taking risk. And occasionally we'll make some mistakes. We're quite used to apologizing. I'm very good at apologizing. I apologize almost every day. So it's constantly reinventing yourself and getting that balance correctly, and staying on top of it is really the key challenge, like you said.
Right. Now you talk of a bit of those commonalities, what you brought from the U.S. And
I'm sorry, I didn't answer the commonality part. Yes.
Yes.
The world, obviously, since we've been doing the MTV around the world 20 years ago, is much more globalized. So it's much more connected. Internet's a global platform, has local versions, but it's very much global. And so that's part of it too. You want to connect, which is kind of a cool thing, And one of the great things about our local strategy is that now with all these diversified channels around the world, you can take, from sources of influence. I call them sources of cool. And our channels have such different personalities, you can take elements of them and, connect them to the rest of the world. And there are some common themes. Again, you can't take it too extreme, but young people, they may have some common elements in how they dress and fashion, how they eat, how they date even, chat lines, communication, some of the music tastes. There's much less global music stars now than there were before, but there are some. So there are common elements, and because we're all around the world, we're in 160 countries, we can uniquely tap into all that and therefore connect it.
Now still, you talk of the local model. Obviously you're reaching out to all the different audiences, but there's still criticism, believe it or not, by some that perhaps it's a bit too much of a Western cookie cutter model. You've got programs like Pimp My Ride, The Hills, etc. that's being it's being beamed across the world. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes, I don't know what's happening in Pimp My Ride. Half the time I can't understand them. And I'm sure for a lot of other Asians as well, perhaps English not as first language, that's going to
I don't want you to understand. That's a good thing. Well, again, it's audience driven. In some countries, I don't know, it's almost completely local. Arabia is a good example. The region of Arabia, we launched a pan-regional service there. But in other countries, it can actually skew more international. And, it just depends on what works. Now, Pimp My Ride, I'm glad you don't understand it. That's a good thing. But that's one that we do localize in some markets. So we take the format, which is kind of a workable thing. You can do it without, investing too much, although it is an investment, obviously. But you just, take it and change it. Change it with language, change it with the on-air host, change it with even the cars, whatever it takes, and just localize it. So, I think of all of the criticisms. We do take criticism very well. We're blamed for a lot. But the cookie cutter approach was one that probably is the opposite, because, again, we've gone so far in the local strategy, and we did that early on, and it was controversial when we did it, because it was, less margins. We had to invest in offices around the world and product and transponders and, the whole deal. So, But with that being said, now, we can take advantage of all these sources of influence and exchange it around the world.
Now, it's interesting, you say you adapt to different cultures, but how do you adapt to different platforms? Obviously, MTV, you've got TV in there, everyone thinks of television, but now there's the internet, there's mobile platforms. How are you reaching out to all of those different platforms at the moment?
Well, the M in MTV stands for multi-platform. We've been doing this for a long time, way back when, in the 90s. And we've come to the point now where actually we have more digital products than we do analog channels. Right. Have something like 348 at last count. We launched more when I don't even know about it. Digital products, meaning mobile TV channels, broadband channels, websites. And, again, about 160 analog channels. So, we've been doing this for a long time. And again, because of our, global footprint with the analog channels, we can uniquely do some things that a pure internet company can't do. And we've been working on this for a long time. So, we do everything. We cross-program, cross-promote, cross-sell. For an advertiser, it's one-stop shopping. You can buy the websites, the mobile TV if you want, and certainly all the channels. And then you can integrate, between them. And it also provides an amazing, almost unlimited opportunity to do things on the creative side. That's quite something. You can, iCarly about an internet chat show. The star is on the internet as she's on the show. The Hills encourages comments, which on the reruns we actually integrate as part of the show. You can be watching an award show and on your mobile have a different channel. A different camera angle or backstage interviews in addition to the performances. You can go deeper into artist performance. It's unlimited. It's really quite something. And I think the most important thing about this whole, digital transformation, and at some point we need to stop talking about digital and analog because it really is seamless now, particularly as more countries drop analog, as a technology. But the most important part about it is that it's just incredible opportunity because it increases increases the number of consumers. It increases consumer satisfaction. And as the viewing or the usage becomes more interactive, that actually is better for the brand. And we've seen that so many times. We've seen it so many shows that when you integrate the on-air show with the online version, satisfaction actually shoots way up. And the ratings go up. So, you increase the consumer loyalty, particularly for strong brands, by having the interactive component. And, strangely, believe it or not, it actually improves our programming because we interact with the audience, so that actually has an impact on our programming, on our creative process. So, it's really probably the most, in the time I've been doing this for 20 years, 30 years on television, it's the most exciting thing that has happened to our business because it just provides so much more opportunity to not only tap into consumer behavior and consumer viewership, consumer traffic, but also, ultimately, the business revenue.
But it sounds so terribly complex to be multi-platform, as you say, multi-dimensional that way. How do you manage that whole process? It must cost a lot more money, surely.
Well, I don't manage it too well. Thankfully, I've got a great team around the world. We've been all over the map on this one. We started first separate organization for digital. Oh my gosh. Back in the dot-com bubble in the late 90s, we were doing separate companies. We were doing separate IPOs. And then after the bubble burst, we realized it's got to be seamless. So the only way to manage it is to integrate it. With that being said, we still do have in some of our operations around the world a separate digital creative team because the mobile screen is much different than the TV screen. But the trend is clearly to blend the creative process, and also early in this decade, we had very separate sales forces. We still do in some operations, but again, the trend is to have one sales force do a 360 sale. And again, for the advertiser, it's one-stop shopping because the advertiser, oh my gosh, is confronted with so many choices. And talk about complexity. It's so complicated to be an advertiser. Or in the agency business because there's just so many choices. Right. So we try and make it as simple as possible. One-stop shopping, you can do everything. And our choice is unlimited, and we try and edit, where you'd want to go depending on what demographic you're looking for or TimeSpot or whatever. But for an advertiser comes to us, you can do channel only, you can do Europe only, you can do Europe plus, South America, you can do, India plus North America. Literally unlimited amounts of choices, or you can go global. And then you layer onto that, you can do the websites, or you can do the broadband channels, or Indian if you want, even though it's just starting on the mobile TV side. So it's really an incredible opportunity to make the relationship with the advertiser much easier in a much more complicated world for the advertiser.
Now that we've gone into the whole advertising, you say it's one-stop shopping for the advertiser. Of course, a lot of our audience, we've got a lot of an advertising crowd here as well. Is it recession-proof, though, this model that you've got?
Well, this is a tough time, and I've just been in 3 continents in the last 7 days. This is a global crisis, no question, a global recession, I think, ultimately. In Europe, it's already in, England, France, Germany's headed there, and Italy. So Euro's there. Actually, Europe probably jump-started the U.S. because technically the U.S. had an up second quarter. They had an up second quarter probably because of the stimulus. But third quarter, it's going to be down, I'm sure. So, and coming here to Asia, there's been a little bit of a lag as I've seen my travels so far in Asia, but it's so interconnected now. Now, a couple of things. One, I believe passionately, I've been doing this long enough where I've seen 80, 81, which was bad at the time. 91, also very bad. I wasn't here for 29, by the way. But 80, 81 was bad. 90, 91 was bad. Internet bubble plus 01, 9/11. They were all bad, but we all always recovered stronger than ever. That's number one. So we got to focus on the long term and work our way through it. In our business, there is some recession-proof aspect to it, not completely, but we have seen. I used to work for a paid TV company. We saw very much subscriptions would go up actually because you want to stay home, and the in-home entertainment, whether it's TV or internet. In our case, we also have a lot of gaming online. And console. So there is an element that it is recession-proof, and we're obviously pushing that quite a bit. But with that being said, you have to focus on the long term. Realize we'll get through it, and as a company, I think there's a couple things you should pay attention to. One is again focus on the long term, but probably think it's going to be longer than it is. Rather than do the escape wishful thinking thing. Probably plan for it to be longer. I think that's always a safer bet going through 3 or 4 of these recessions. Communicate with your employees, very important, constantly. Not the time to hole yourself up in an office. What else? Communicate, energize your employees. If there's a year-end budget that's not going to be made, redo the bonus plan, so you can energize them. And I think also there are opportunities. There are competitive opportunities. Now's not the time to stop. Continue, doing what you do best, and maybe steal more market share. So I think in bad, tough times, there is an opportunity. And I'll say one final thing. I know I'm going on long, especially in MTV time. For us, we're going to get through it, no question. And we focus on our pure demographics because that's what our brands are about. Maximum efficiency, pure brands. And there is a ladder. There is a media ladder where, first print is affected, nowadays anyway. Radio, probably second. Local television, then after that, and then broadcast television. And then usually last on this totem pole, at least now, to be impacted the most severely is cable. So, at least we're in the right business, and internet and digital. So that helps somewhat. And for us, even though advertising is so important to us, we now generate over half our revenue from non-advertising. Whether that's subscription fees, program sales, consumer products is a very big business for us. We go offline now with, obviously our internet's a big business, but gaming, we are the number 2 gaming site online in the entire world, all of our sites added up together. All of our websites now have 100 million page views every month, so we're up there like in the top 6 or so. And increasingly we focus on other things as well, like we do theme parks, hotels, and we even do a Nickelodeon cruise. So we do we diversify our revenue stream, but most importantly, we will get through this on an advertising side. There's no question in my mind, after seeing the history.
Right. You talked about the opportunities there and how you still have bits of your business that are recession-proof. Could that potentially, these opportunities come from Asia? You said there's no digital footprint without the likes of, there's no global strategy without the likes of China. And obviously you've done very well in India as well. Can you talk about your expansion plans there?
Well, I love Asia. I've been coming here for so long. Early in my life, I spent a year in Asia. And it's always been a great love for me, and I, am always so envious of everyone who, is in this market and works in this incredibly positive, booming market. And when you look at the world, if you're a global company, you still see majority of revenue and profits coming from Europe. It's just the way it is in media. But the growth rates are higher here, just by definition. And, it obviously has its challenges, and Asia's not Asia. It's really made up of so much diversity and so many different factors and so many markets. Look at China and India. It's so incredibly different. But I think any global company, like you said, China, it has to be part of it. Certainly India has to be part of it. And Japan and Korea. Those are the major markets. But really all of Asia should be a key part of anyone's Asia strategy. And while there are obviously, tons of challenges, that's where the growth is. And, China now, I just came from Shanghai and drove from Guangzhou to Hong Kong, which, by the way, was like a constant road of buildings. There's no suburbia. But it's booming. It's just, I don't need to say that it sounds so cliche, but it is remarkable what's happening. The magnitude alone and, the cultural impact. So, you have to be a player here and overcome whatever challenges there are. And there are very different set of challenges, by the way, in India than there are in China. But, it's got to be part of the strategy. You got to succeed. You got to figure out a way to make it succeed.
Now, you've done remarkably well in India, where a lot of other foreign broadcasters have failed. Viacom's done particularly well with Nickelodeon. You've got the GE Colors channel as well. Yeah. Can you talk us through why you've been so successful there, and would it be sustainable even?
Well, we've had a long history in India. We've had a few missteps, in the early days. At one point, we were the local team wanted to be too American, go figure. So we had to say, no, go more local. That was the big step, 10 years or so, when we went Bollywood on the clips in MTV. But we've had a long record, a long history with MTV, particularly more recently with VH1 and Nickelodeon. Now, what we decided to do, we did a lot of research, and because India is such a big part of the future, we had to make it work there. And we saw a lot of research that increasingly said, even though the middle class is booming, poverty's been lifted, and access to media and television has increased, so dramatically, that there were still primarily the market was driven by single sets. So the big opportunity was a general entertainment channel. And we haven't actually done this before, but we decided to get away from our niche brand and to launch a general entertainment channel. Well, first we found a partner, and TV18 has been a terrific partner. The partnership is called Viacom 18, and we launched, as you said, Colors in July. And it was a little daunting, not for the faint-hearted, because the market went from I think 3 to 8 or so, maybe 9 general entertainment channels. So it's very, very competitive, and there's been a huge proliferation of channels. So that's daunting. But we worked hard with a partner, and we also launched other companion channels to go with it. Rejuvenated our MTV and Nickelodeon. As you said, Nickelodeon's now come way up, from I don't know where it was before, but now it's like number 2, sometimes number 1. And Colors is number 2, out of nowhere. So again, local programming worked best for us. We have 2 very strong shows that are just, big winners, local shows. Reality is the biggest one, following a sort of a soap opera / reality format. And so we're off to a great start. And that's actually had carried the tail of the other niche channels as well, the platform. So we feel very good where we are so far in India.
And we're almost running out of time, but of course the interview wouldn't be quite complete without talking about the fact that you're the ambassador for UN AIDS, and you've obviously been involved in these social issues for a number of years. And it's not just AIDS and HIV, it's also climate change, etc., etc. Can you tell us, obviously these are very important issues, but has it actually benefited your business?
Well, this was, again, early on for us, too. In order to more vertically connect with the consumer, we felt, issues were important, some various issues. And we do so many different local issues around the world. But we have three, global issues. HIV/AIDS is our most visible, but climate change is something we've more recently been involved in, and also human trafficking are our global issues. And this is more about, just realizing to be a good corporate citizen, a global citizen, take advantage. In our case, we have this, amazing network of, the magnitude of our audience and the vertical connection with our audience. For HIV, there was really no choice. We had to be involved with this because HIV affects our audience more than anybody else. And likewise, climate change is going to impact young people more than anything else. And because it's a global issue, what happens here affects here. We just felt it was very important to be involved, especially in those two issues. So, power of television, it's quite incredible, and we often take it for granted. But television's often blamed for a lot of things, and sometimes people like to say television's not a good thing. But television, particularly in getting vertically involved in some of these issues, can be a really good thing. And it can educate, of course, it can inspire, and it can, in HIV/AIDS case, it can actually save lives. So just, a minute on that. We focus on prevention and discrimination and stigma. And we basically have two efforts. One is the campaign, which reaches billions of people, because we produce everything rights-free, and we've developed a network of television stations and radio stations around the world that air our programming, don't have the budgets or the inclination to produce their own. So, we actually have quite a huge exposure. And it's everything from a 30-second spot to a 90-minute movie. And we build it into the DNA so much that it's part of scripts. Living with HIV is part of life now. It doesn't have to be a death sentence. So arming all of our audience members with, number one, prevention. That's our objective. 100% of our audience and young people around the world should know how to prevent the spread of this disease, number one. Number two, discrimination. And, we've concluded a long time ago that this is a really strong part of our culture. That's AIDS is more than a global health issue. It's about humanity, because certain groups are more vulnerable than others. Gender, women more vulnerable than men. Age, young more than older. Socioeconomic groups, sexual preference. So it's about humanity, and it's about equality. And that's been a very big part about that. I think particularly now in these times, it's also very important. If you're a global company, you're a guest in many countries. So, the payback is, really something that's so important, and we just believe in it passionately, and I appreciate you bringing it up. Thank you.
So television as a force for good. Well, on that note, we're going to have to end the interview, but thank you very much, Bill Roedy from MTV.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.